ladies and gentlemen, everyone rounded in between. This is DebateSensei NPDA edition, where we talk about things relevant to the National Parliamentary Debate Association. It is a college-level debate association, does parliamentary debate. I am Jared Kabika Miller. I'm an old fogey that still teaches argumentation and debate. I have Paul Villa with me. He is a big wig with the National Parliamentary Tournament of Excellence. What's your official title? I think you said it.
At the NPDA, I'm a webmaster. I'm a webmaster. I'm the executive board.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There you go. We got so and in that website you were talking about how it's coming along and it's going to be coming up pretty soon. And
yeah, and so basically we had these big dreams for how we were going to do the rankings in the database and everything, and then we decided in the last few weeks, like, we already have the spreadsheet thing, we'll worry about that next season. This season was just get the website up so people find the invite and stuff, and so we pivoted to that. Pretty much everything's done. We've just got to actually get it posted now. Like, the design process is done essentially. So
all right,
we'll do some stuff with web services.
So our topic this time is the status of NPDA, and this came about because as you and I were chit-chatting about the series and what we wanted to talk about, it sort of naturally and organically emerged as a central sort of thesis. And I think I'm of course doing other series with other debate associations, and so NPDA is kind of this series is kind of metaphorically similar because we switched halfway through, getting a new guest going on, and I think that's like, man, it seems to be symbolic a little bit of it seems like NPDA is kind of hitting some rough spots recently, and so I'd love to get your perspective on this because you are way more embedded in this than I am. I've been taking step backs away from tournaments and competition and traveling over the years, and so I really am interested to hear what you have to say. So without further ado, the status of NPDA. I mean, in a nutshell, what would you say?
Not great. Not great would be my top answer. I have been raising this alarm for close to a decade now. I remember having, back when there was a significant presence for College Parley on Facebook, College Parliamentary Debate Group. I remember getting into a lot of arguments with people about whether NPDA was like really declining or what was causing it and so on and so forth. And I remember trying to like show people a lot of data and stuff and be like, well, look, here's what the entries look like at the national tournament or at these tournaments. And interestingly, here's what it looks like at state and at Firo Pi. And so like, what's the disconnect here? And so on and so forth. And so NPDA is like borderline existential, I would say. We're in a moment where if the ship does not get significantly turned, I can't see the NPDA as an association really lasting beyond even, let's say, the next 5 years or so.
Right.
And that's not to say that there won't be tournaments where NPDA debate is offered, and that's part of the problem, is that the disjoint between the NPDA and tournaments offering NPDA, but the association itself and sort of the teams that compete within it, thinning every year and down to 12, 15 maybe as of now.
Right. And so, I mean, okay, compare that to about 10 years ago. What, if you remember at all?
I went to my first NPDA, like the NPDA National Championship Tournament, when it was held at El Camino College and Long Beach in 2016, I want to say. It was either 2016 or 2015. And if I'm not wrong, there were 216 entries in the open division of parliamentary debate at this tournament, right? If there were 100 entries at any tournament in the last 3 or 4 years, it would have been like Christmas. It would have been like the biggest, like, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. And so the fact that we've gone in, a period of, 8 years or so from multiple hundred people attending the national, I mean, they're not saying really, we're talking about multiple hundred teams. So 400, 500 people actually being at the tournament to there now being, 50 the NPTE website currently only ranks teams that have earned a point. So that means teams that have broken at some tournament throughout the year. And when we look at that, it's like 54 teams, right? And about 25 to 30% of those are mix and matches of students who are in other teams. And so realistically, there's, 80 maximum people doing national circuit parliamentary debate at this point. Right?
Wow.
Individuals.
Okay. Yeah, like when I was competing, it was trending upward. It was only getting more and more. Like I think my NPTE year was the most entries that they saw, the most quals that they saw, and it kept on growing for several years after that. So I'm just shocked at the state of this. So this is like my event. This is what I did for so long.
I remember the first tournament I ever went to. So this is when I was a CC student. The first like national circuit tournament was Paul Winners back when it used to be really big. And I remember when they at awards they said, okay, everyone who advanced to elimination rounds in parliamentary debate, please come forward. And we were in Grace Covell Hall, which is the big like kind of event space at Pacific. There were people wrapped around 3 walls of the building. You know what I mean? Like just of who broke. And it was like, wow, this is really big. And now it's like everyone who broke come forward. It's like 20 people maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's really different. And to have seen that happen basically since I went in Parley, like start to finish, has been very difficult to watch as someone who it's their favorite event and who thinks it's a very important event.
Yeah, now you were talking about the sort of relationship that community college play in NPDA, specifically California community colleges. And this is something that is kind of new to me. So I'd like to know a little bit more about it. Are like California CCs like basically floating NPDA right now?
It's so that's a great question. California CCs, essentially none of them attend NPDA national circuit tournament.
Right. Okay.
Unless they're coincidentally, let me rephrase that. If it's not in California, literally none of them attend. Not a single tournament, right? Like, if it is in California, there's still some that do it, right? But it's very much a thing where, if we were to look at the data, and this is something I think I've mentioned to you before, but last year there were like, I want to say 36 or something like that teams at NPDA. I could look up the exact number, but whatever that number was, a week before NPDA, they had the California Community College State Championship Tournament. And there were that many teams entered in parliamentary debate at state, right? And so there were, if it was 35 or whatever, there were 35. And of those teams, even though state was in California, 3 teams attended the NPDA National Championship, right? And 2 of those teams were my teams, and the other teams were from Delta, and it was in Stockton, which is where Delta is. And so no one, and actually I lied about that. There's one KCC team from Kansas that came. KCC has always been like, they're going to go wherever the high level debate is. They do policy, they do everything.
Yeah, they're great. I love it.
Yeah, they're fantastic. But so with that said, the conversion rate of doing Parley at the community college level to doing college at the national circuit university-ish level is close to 0 at this point. And it didn't used to be that way, right? You know, there were a lot of students who competed when I competed who transferred, went to places like Pacific or Concordia or schools in Texas or Berkeley even, and went on to compete for a period of time. And now that's just almost unheard of. And there's no connection really between the coaches of these schools and the coaches of the university level teams, right? Like OCC every year will have, I don't know, maybe 5 Parley teams, like a good amount of Parley teams or something at state and at Fire Up High. 0 of those teams will attend a single national circuit tournament or ever will. And if you were to ask like Shaw Davari, who's Dave Worth, right? Like former president of the NPDA, coach of one of the best teams in the country. Who's Joe Provencher? These people do not know each other. They have no association with each other whatsoever. And that's not great. You know, it's not great that there's not that connection. Because back in the day, there used to at least be Elko. Like El Camino, you could count on was going to come to Mile High, and we're going to go to various tournaments, and we're kind of doing more of the national circuit style Parley. And now, even that's not super true, right? Like they're not attending NPDA as well, and especially because part of it is that their schedules changed to go to like internationals, which tend to conflict with it. But the bottom line is, there's no CC teams that are effectively participating except for KCC when they can in these tournaments. Like zero at this point.
Okay. You briefly mentioned about internationals, and I have just a little quibble about this, and I'd like to get your perspective, which is why do they schedule it when they do? Like the way I think about it is like you go state and then Nats and then international. Like I would think that like it would.
I think it's because there's very little communication between these organizations. Even though like FirePie, for instance, has a I forget what the term is, but there's like an officer position basically that is like liaison to internationals or whatever. And it's hard. It's really hard for schools that have to choose between like spend this money to go to NPDA or NPTE or even state to a certain degree and have the school you attend pay for a vacation to Ireland or Japan.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, fair enough. But yeah, I mean, the problem is just that there's not a conversion rate whatsoever. And it's not even the kind of thing where, so for my students, we're a little bit different because I have this Parley background. Parley is like my favorite debate event. We're very Parley focused at DVC and likely will be. And we're going to run this thing into the ground, whatever it is, and because of that, I have students who are wanting to go to Berkeley or San Diego State or Rice or UT Tyler or Pacific or like get a debate scholarship somewhere in Parley specifically. And I don't know that that really is happening at pretty much any of these other community colleges. Like, even from that perspective of like, look, you're an educator. In theory, you want your students to take this forensic stuff and go somewhere and do more forensic stuff if they can help pay for their education. And we don't even have those pathways for them.
Right.
So yeah, it's a problem.
Do you think any other debate formats are like siphoning people?
I think this is the problem. Okay. I think this is the problem, right? So Parley, for years was sort of operating in this Goldilocks zone where it was a technical debate event with a low level of entry. So it had a fairly high skill ceiling, but a relatively low barrier of entry. Your average coach who went to State or FirePie could coach a team for years and be just fine. They didn't need to go to the NPDA. They didn't need to go to the NPTE, etc. We have a problem now where if you are looking for a highly technical format of debate with critiques and theory and all that kind of stuff, and you want it to be 2-on-2, why wouldn't you do policy?
Yeah.
Which is objectively more prestigious. There's more scholarship opportunity. It's better, kind of, and if you want to do one-on-one, why wouldn't you do LD? Where similarly, right, there's evidence, there's speed, there's technique, all that stuff. Now, the other side of the spectrum is what happens when Parley is your casual format of debate, right? Community colleges for years, it was the casual format of debate. If you wanted to have your students do debate and you didn't want to have to do a lot of work, you did Parley. But then we introduced IPDA. And IPDA kind of got sold to the community colleges as like, hey, it's really easy to get judging coverage because you can just ask random people from the street or have like undergrads in public speaking classes judge debate and whatnot. And when that was being proposed at FirePie, Jeff Toney from Delta, who's also like a Parley person, was like, this is going to like kill these events. This is going to kill LD. This is going to kill Parley. Like you're just going to siphon more people off of it. We can't sustain that. That's a problem. But it passed. And speech coaches love IPDA because they can coach it and they don't need to know a whole lot about debate, and they can judge it and they don't need a whole lot about debate, and they're not worried they're going to get post-rounded and yelled at like they might in Parley or policy or something. And so Parley has to exist in this space where it is accessible but can have a high skill ceiling. And the problem is, on one end of the spectrum, the adoption of IPDA means that if it is casual, it will siphon them off in that direction. And the other problem is the national circuit has decided they literally would rather Parley die than be more accessible. Like they would rather it look like policy or whatever and die than have more community colleges do it, basically, right? And when you try and have conversations with people about this, it's virtually impossible. And it always comes back to the exact same things, right? Where like, it used to just be funding. Everyone say, oh, it's funding. Funding killed Parley. And it's like, but it didn't kill LD. And it didn't kill policy. Did it kill speech? Oh, it didn't also kill speech. All 12 speech events doing just fine, except for maybe Duo, right? Then the excuse became, no, COVID. COVID killed Parley. And it's like, okay, well, if we look at the data of Parley before COVID, it was straight line down.
Yeah.
And then COVID, maybe bigger or whatever, I guess. But if you were to ask these coaches and I know these coaches, so I'm throwing out school names. I'm not actually saying like Shaw or whatever, but like, if you were to ask the coaches at OCC or Mount San Antonio College or Moorpark College or like whatever community college that does Parley, Rio Hondo, et cetera, if they would be more willing to do Parley, if it wasn't spreading heavy, if people actually talked about the topic more frequently, if there weren't these like vacuous theory debates, if it wasn't, just focus on those three things initially, right? Like the technical elements of Parley. The answer would be yes. The answer just would be yes, because it was yes for a long time. And now we've kind of jumped the shark and these people feel like either Parley doesn't want them, like they're going to be treated poorly because they're not, skilled or whatever. Or, and this is another big problem, Parley was just way too gatekept for years, right? People were hostile, like openly hostile towards anyone who wasn't a part of, the Parley scene or whatever and wanted changes to Parley. And, now you're kind of reaping what you sowed.
Wow. I mean, so there were teams when I was competing whose thing was like, yeah, we're just running the same critique every time. It's like F or neg. And they were just not incredibly successful. Like statism, it seemed to be the popular flavor of the day at that time. It might seem kind of outdated now, but yeah. And so but I could see how people just keep on doing it, and it just gets faster and faster. Yeah, we used to clown on people who went that fast. We'd lump and dump.
People have become afraid to say clear.
Oh, really?
Like, to a certain degree, and honestly, this is, obviously, Brennan and Tristan, one thing that I appreciate about them is that, like, they'll be in a final round. They're the team that's the reigning national champions. Brennan's maybe the fastest skater, the second fastest skater in the country. Brennan clears people all the time. She's just not having it. And she's like, it doesn't matter that, like, we can flow and we are good. Like, if we're not going to pretend we can understand you.
Yeah.
But here's the problem, Jared. This is a huge problem. Judges in Parley on the national circuit are unwilling to admit they can't hang.
Oh.
Okay.
Really?
Here's the bottom line, Jared. I never won nationals, and I came pretty close, like twice. I competed against the best teams in the country, had a very good winning record, whatever. If I'm in a round and I'm in the debate and I can't keep up with what the person is saying, why would the judge who was less successful and like not as good at debate, like there's this percentage of judges who, when they were competitors, could not hang, like could not beat these teams. But now that they're judges, all of a sudden are flowing robots.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they just don't want to clear you. And the problem is when it comes to the K debate, when it's fast, if you read the same position over and over and over again all year in front of the judges, they are familiar with your arguments. Okay. So what do they do when they don't actually get your argument in this specific round? They fill in the blank because they've seen you go for this K a bunch of times.
Right.
And now, even though the other debaters couldn't hear it, and so it just creates this vicious cycle where like people don't want to admit that they can't hang or that we've gotten too fast or whatever. And that makes kids go even faster. And, it sort of all is this vicious cycle of what happens. And not to mention that, first off, I don't have personally an issue with like people reading Ks, like my students read Ks sometimes, whatever. I think Ks are cool and educational. But I do think you have to admit, in the context of parliamentary debate, there are a number of issues with the critique that are not present in evidentiary formats of debate.
Right.
Namely, in LD and policy, when someone reads the K, they have an author. And I can read exactly what their author said, read every bit of the context. I can look up authors who disagree with their author, so on and so forth. There are disclosure norms around seeing the evidence ahead of time, potentially. And partly, people can come up and say, like, NASA has proven that there's infinite happiness and sadness in the world, and that means Buddhism's real or whatever. And what can you do other than go, nuh-uh, that's not true? And they go, well, we said NASA said it, so we win.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of issues with it. And then when we combine speed. So, yeah, I mean, Bob, I've been talking for a second, but I think that the unwillingness to make debate more accessible in terms of like just let people be able to compete without all of these sort of barriers and sort of honoring certain rules and things of that nature has caused significant issues with converting people who aren't already all in on Parley. One thing I haven't mentioned that is very important: there are not a lot of parliamentary debaters in high school.
Okay.
Parliamentary debate isn't even offered, as far as I'm aware, or maybe it is now by the NSDA at
That's a
nationals.
big deal.
And as a result, Parley only really exists, as far as I'm aware, in California and like somewhat in New York in high school. And
Right.
so the problem is we don't have a huge pool that we're able to draw to. We have to convert public forum students. Why
Right.
would public forum students be attracted to Parley? If they
Yeah.
want something that's lay like public forum, why wouldn't they go do IPDA or BP?
Yeah.
If
Or LD. Yeah. They
Yeah, and if
like.
they want something evidentiary, why wouldn't they go do LD or policy?
Yeah.
Like, how do we sell the? And that's honestly, that's like half of the mission of Proteus debate has just been like, we promise Parley's cool, like check it out, it's a good time. But that sells a hard one to make, and we have not had presence as an organization, the NPDA that is, at like nationals or anything. It's not like we have a booth telling people like do parliamentary debate in college or anything like that. And this sound, I don't know that this is necessarily true, but I've tried to think about this and look into it. And I think maybe the most like popular and public content that exists on the internet advocating for parliamentary debate is my YouTube channel with Sasan.
Really.
Like, where are the can you name another YouTube channel or blog or anything that is Parley focused?
Yeah, like because even DebateSensei is a little bit way more generic. Like
Yeah,
general,
you know,
you know what
and
I mean?
so like
Yeah.
there's just no one's fighting the fight for Parley out there, and it's tough. It's tough, man. It's a hard
Okay.
sell.
Yeah. It like as you're talking, it almost seems like um like Parley is kind of getting like colonized by policy. You know what I mean? Like I mean, I don't
To a certain degree.
I hesitate to say that, but a lot of policy debaters kind of come on over. They're like, hey, we're just gonna transfer the stuff that we're doing there over here because that's what I know. Um, and
That's
I don't,
partially why so many students from Texas are so great. Because
oh,
Texas
okay.
has a really strong. It's also the PNW. Like the Texas and Oregon have historically had good policy circuits,
Hmm.
and then if those kids end up doing Parley instead of policy, they've been very successful. I mean, Gabe and Alex are some kids like that, but
Hmm.
some of the kids at UT Tyler are like that.
Yeah, and like all the topics now are policy topics, right? I
Yeah. Oh,
mean,
in NPDA, yeah. Like in terms of like national circuit tournaments, CC still does some of the value in fact, but yeah, you're not going to go to an NPDA tournament outside of Southern California that has a value topic.
yeah. I mean, that was I don't know. Those debates were freaking interesting. Even if you were on the neg, even if you didn't know what was coming, I don't know. Like that was part of the challenge, in my opinion. I don't know. I kind of liked it. You were sort of wrestling more with sort of language and use and things like that, rather than unnecessarily, like policy and impacts and things.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It really helped me, especially in grad school. You know what I mean? It's like because you're not always doing policy debates in grad school. It's like you have to
Yes.
think um, a little bit more abstractly, and so that sort of abstract thought I guess exists in the critiques to some degree, but if you're doing the same one over and over again, the variety that you get and the breadth that you get was so valuable to me.
I mean, that's another difference, right? Where it's like Parley is by definition an extemporaneous event. It has rotating topics and limited prep times. You're supposed to have 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever, to prepare the topic. But if one team has the entire year to prepare their K and prepare all of the answers to the theory arguments you're going to read about why they don't get their K, why wouldn't they have a significant advantage over you?
Yeah,
Like, if you're the affirmative, unless you're going to read a K, you can't risk not preparing for the topic. Like, you have to assume they're going to read a disad, so you have to split your prep. But they know almost certainly you're going to read a topic laugh, right? Unless you're a K
yeah,
team, and then it's just K versus K and whatever, let the topic go. And it's not like all topics are good topics or anything. And
no,
again, I think there is room for critiques, but I think that because Parley and all debate is a game, people try and do these strategies that are more effective. And Parley is a particularly poorly designed game as it pertains to the critique and speed, because there's no evidence and there's no record of what people said. So it's just, can you write and listen really fast? And who has rehearsed their thing more often? And I've done a video on Proteus about this, but one of the very great parliamentary debaters from Berkeley who won multiple national championships, I transcribed member of government speeches they gave, right, in 2 national final rounds, a week apart. Okay, different tournament, different topic, different opponent. And the first 3 minutes of their MG was identical.
Oh, wow.
And that shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't be possible for the second speaker in an extemporaneous debate format to say the exact same few hundred words and be successful.
Yeah, that's a shame. That really is a shame. Like it one idea that just kind of sprang to mind is like when people come up and they're like, all right, we're rejecting the topic. Here's our K and stuff like that. It seems like you're not just rejecting the topic. It's like you're rejecting this format of debate, like as a whole, like entirely. It's like we refuse to participate, and that does seem to like dovetail into what you're talking about. It's like we'd like to see it die. That's sad. I don't know.
And I think that if I was, god of debate or whatever, I think we only realistically need 4 kinds of debate, 6 at the max. We need an individual extemporaneous format, a partner extemporaneous format, an individual evidentiary format, and a partnered evidentiary format.
Right.
And, a lot of those boxes are checked off by things like IPDA, LD, and policy. But the problem is there is no competing option for Parley. Like, if I don't want to do policy debate, I could theoretically, well, at least in high school, I could theoretically go do public forum. And that is an evidentiary format of debate that is 2-on-2. It's, more casual or whatever. But what is the replacement for Parley?
Yeah.
Like 2-person IPDA. They've tried that at one tournament. It didn't even make. APDA debate's doing all right. But it's almost overwhelmingly just the Ivy League schools that do it. And so
I was
how
wondering
accessible
about
is that for community colleges?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's like the APDA seems like it's just like an insiders club.
Yes.
Of when they get together. So, and I don't know much about it.
Yeah, and so I don't know things that I've tried, right, as part of the NPTE, and this year's a little bit different. But when we were first designing the NPTE, before we realized like this year probably needs to run like a standard NPTE just to get people back in or whatever, we were just trying to make sure we designed it to be cool. Okay, like literally, like every decision we were making around tournament design was, how cool does this sound? Hey, you know what? We don't have a trophy for this. We're making a trophy for this. It's going to be sick. Let's do it. You know what? Every tournament is run this way. Let's change the structure. Let's do like a group system and like do it. And then let's do an announce show where like we draw teams into different rounds like they do for the World Cup and whatever, right? And that's a year away or something at this point. But Parley just doesn't have a fun presence anymore. There's not this online element to it where people are posting memes to each other and like, making jokes about the current tournament or, oh my gosh, there's a delay. Ha ha ha. I hate to say this, there just is no Parley community anymore.
Right.
There was a Parley community of people who knew each other and talked to each other, even outside of just when we were at tournaments, and who hung out and, did karaoke or whatever it might be. And now there are just like 10 schools that do Parley that don't necessarily interact a ton, that never talk on the internet. Like if you go to the college Parley Facebook page or the NPTE Facebook page, 80% of the posts are either, here's my tournament, please come, or me posting rankings. Like there's no student involvement. I don't know the last time a student posted anything on those websites. If you go look at it 2016 through 2018, that's all it was. It was just students talking to each other, asking questions, all these kinds of things that don't exist
anymore. Yeah, I mean there was there was a net benefits.
Net benefits. Yeah.
Is that dead or?
Oh, that's been gone. Yeah, that's been gone for years now.
Yeah, I figured. I remember that. Like they were one of the first ones doing online debating, just text-based debating. Jed Link, he was a he was a competitor of mine. Not of mine. Like I competed against him. Yeah, but he was the guy who put that together. I wonder what he's doing these days. Anyways,
yeah. one thing I do want to note is because I know we're coming closer on time. I think a big part of the problem was the doomers who were the early doomers. If you're a
Okay.
doomer right now, I kind of get it. Like,
Yeah.
the writing's kind of on the wall.
Yeah.
But there were a number of teams over the last 4 to 5 years who were like, yeah, the numbers are going down and so on and so forth. And, we're pivoting to this and we're pivoting to that. And if everyone who was a doomer at that time was still here, we'd be doing just fine. But everyone kind of saw their like off ramp or whatever into something else, or the time came for them as a director and they just weren't interested in it anymore. They didn't have the will to go on or whatever. But we've lost a lot of those schools, right? We've lost entire regions. There's not really a Pacific Northwest other than Whitman these days. There's 2 schools in Texas basically that do debate. We've lost a lot of the schools that were in like Missouri. And so I think it's just unfortunate that those folks didn't hold out, because I do think that now leadership is making some solid decisions and solid attempts. And I do think that there are efforts being made to make Parley feel more like a community or fun or whatever. And I even think some of the argument stuff has changed. I think people are talking about the topic more. I just do think that's true. I just worry that it's too late. And that's a shame if it is. And like I said, I'll be out there doing CC Parley for, the rest of my career or whatever, as long as the event's around, because I think it's fun. I think it's great for students to work in an extemporaneous setting with a partner. But the national circuit seems to be a different beast and doesn't seem interested in those students.
Well, like as we were talking, one thought I was having is like, maybe we should try to put together some sort of high school level, like you were saying that there's no high school feeders or anything like that, from if we did like California, as many high schools as we could try to get together and then create pathways and through community college through to the university. I mean, I'd be willing to help out with that.
And interestingly, this is, obviously you don't know Sasan too well, but that's kind of what Sasan's been working on in New York. Is he works for a nonprofit debate organization and he's in charge of like the debate curriculum and whatnot. And he's kind of in this process of like, okay, how do we make Parley a standard format in New York for these students? And how do we do that in California eventually? How do we set up sustainable infrastructure for these people? That's kind of how Proteus started. Originally, the goal of Proteus was we want to make resources not for students so much. We want to make resources for English teachers who want to make a parliamentary debate team or whatever. But it's just challenge. It's a challenge, and locally, like where I am now in Northern California, there are a few schools who, because of their interactions with us or whatever, DVC or other community colleges, are kind of trending in that direction. And, some of our alumni help them, but it's going to take some time. It's definitely going to take some time.
Well, like maybe you and I could brainstorm how we could do something from the Bay to the border out here in California. That would be that'd be worthwhile, because building it from the ground up, because then making it fun, you know what I mean? It's like, just make it just like, that's the reason why I'm doing this, is because I like talking about different topics all the time, just getting a little bit of information here and there, and Parley was able to do that. While I appreciate the year-long topics, it was I didn't have I don't know. I definitely have an ADHD streak in me, for sure. Well, it was an eye-opening discussion about this, and so it's unfortunate the way that it's going, but maybe, I don't know, anyone watching this, if you want to get together, especially in California, putting together some sort of program to like maybe get some younger and younger people participating in it, I think that might be a great endeavor. All right. Anyways, Paul, thank you so much for giving me your perspective on this. It was very, very helpful. And we will be back in the future talking about more NPDA stuff. Thank you.